History Things podcast, a conversational approach to discussing social, industrial, maritime, music, and military history. Join us and our special guests as we dive down the rabbit holes of your favorite stories from the past. Follow the History Things podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or online at Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be sure to leave a review and a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. Pat and Parker are coming right up. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. Welcome back to the History Things podcast. Season 7, baby. We are chugga chugga choo choo. We are into it now. Took a nice little winter break. Coming to you in a nice, peaceful, calm, late January setting. I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire, joined as always by the ambassador from Maine himself, Parker Russell. How are you? Happy New Year, big guy.
Happy New Year to you, too.
Happy New Year. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yes, we just had the big number.
50,007, is it? 50,007?
I'm another year closer to
somewhere
my
ancient
grave.
dust.
Yes.
Well, it's good to see you. I haven't physically seen you in a while. Most people enjoyed their holidays with their family and friends. You were like laid up with the death at the end of the year.
Yeah,
man.
so it's great to see you. It's great to be here. This is like the first time we've been physically in the same room since pre-Thanksgiving. Yeah. I was getting ready to go to my family's.
That's right. You were heading down south, going down to Georgia.
Yep. And while I was in Georgia, I'm not going to disclose too much, but I was working on a little project.
Parker did something kind of cool. Yeah, something the show's never done before. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I got to live a little bit of the dream.
So laid up with the illness.
Yeah.
You missed a lot. There was Thanksgiving. There was lots of food. There was Christmas. There was lots of joy and cheer. Mm-hmm. And then there was a lot of you just cough syruped out on the couch. Down.
I'm cough syruped up right here.
It's 2026 now.
Right.
Maybe it's 2027. You might have slept for a long time.
Might have slept for a little while. I did find this drug. This it's not a drug. That sounds
It's called
great.
NyQuil.
The stuff you have to ask the lady for behind the cage. I was told I could get some better junk than this stuff that's over here. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I got the stuff. You want a red pill or a white pill?"
I got the stuff.
And I was like, "All right, give me the white pill. I guess is it more powerful?" And she's like, "Yeah, the white pill is stronger." And I was like, "All right, I'll just take that then." 3 days later, I was still awake. I do remember kind of going to work.
Well, while you were doing the peaks and valleys of this illness on and illness off kind of thing,
right.
The show did attempt to go on. We did have recordings that are going to be out later this year with Cody Aish and with Eric Mohney pretty imminently, as in the one you're listening to right now. Woo! Where we had to fly him solo. We just had schedule-wise, we had to do something we've never done on the show before, which was literally just go with one of us. I sat down today with Eric Mohney to talk about something very near and dear to his heart, something that if you're in the Civil War, reenacting community and or just, in the popular study of the Civil War, you'd be familiar with this unit, the Pennsylvania Bucktails, or the Bucktails.
Bucktails. Ooh.
That's right. That's good.
That's the real reason. That's the real reason I wasn't down here.
Yeah, we actually didn't want him to do that.
Oh, you're talking about the Bucktails. And Eric actually reached for a gun. And you're going to have to leave right now.
That's why we had to redo this through Zoom, was because he felt like he was like, my choices are I could kill you, or
I could kill Parker,
or we could just do this later.
Right, exactly.
Oh my God. So Eric's got these beefs with, sort of how people mythologize, the Bucktails with both very easily verifiable information, easy to find information, and stuff that you might have to put some effort into. And Eric's going to take us through this conversation of his beefs. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Eric Mohney. Welcome back to the show, buddy. How are you?
Howdy, howdy. I'm pretty good, buddy. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Getting through the holidays. You have a family, I have a family. There's that sort of just like cliff of energy you fall off, and you're like, I think I have hit the bottom of it. I can sleep now. I think I'm there.
My bank account balance plummets. It's insane.
You're like, that ATM card burns. My wallet has burn marks on it.
Yeah, I end up so poor at the end of December every year.
It's always worth it, man. It's always worth it. Santa's good to the kids. So we're here today to have a conversation about a topic very near and dear to your heart. I know that as long as I've known you, there are a few things that you lean into really hard as far as historical interest-wise, and one of those would be your beloved Pennsylvania Bucktails. So we're here to talk about them today. Tell our listeners what's going on with the Bucktails, what's going on. I feel like we're past Festivus, but there might be an airing of the grievances today.
I have a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about them.
That's right. You give him the old Kitchener, Uncle Sam coming at you. Anyway, so let's get into it. What's going on with the Bucktails that's got you wanting to come down here and have a chat about them?
Man, I'll tell you, they're not one of the like obscure units, right? Like the Bucktails aren't anything that I would consider like people don't know about them, right?
Yeah, relatively.
There's a lot of
unit.
Right, it is, and deservedly so. But there's a lot of myths and misconceptions that keep floating around, and some of the big ones they're hard to ignore. Like some of the pedantic stuff I can get past, right? But when we start talking about the way they got the bucktail, things like that, like I can't ignore it.
You're talking about like basically easily researchable, findable information that would be
some of it is and
correct anachronisms.
Yeah, some of it is and some of it isn't. So we'll just start out, right? The number one thing, or at least the thing that we can start out with easily, is the naming convention, right? So we've talked about this when we did the reserves episode, how there's this weird naming convention within the reserves as a core, and then even more so with the Bucktails themselves. Pennsylvania created the reserves. They were all like excess volunteers, and the governor didn't want to just send all these guys home and have to try to drag them back when the war inevitably didn't end in 90 days. So the state paid to retain 13 regiments of infantry, 1 cavalry, and 1 artillery. And one of those infantry regiments ended up being a rifle regiment, which is the Bucktails, right? But in the modern era, like right now, I keep seeing these, they're not necessarily incorrect designations, but they're kind of anachronistic, right? So like we'll stick with the Bucktails, right? So it's the 13th Regiment of Pennsylvania Reserves.
All right.
Right. Not a designation they really used much, at least not during the war itself. But mostly what you see is like the 42nd Pennsylvania, which is like wildly anachronistic. That it was used during the war, but not outside of the office of the Adjutant General of Pennsylvania, right? So every regiment in Pennsylvania, or that came out of Pennsylvania, got a sequential line designation.
Right.
So that includes even like the 1st PA Light Artillery is technically, according to the Adjutant General of Pennsylvania, it is the 43rd Pennsylvania. The 1st PA Cavalry is the 44th.
Oh, it's like designated as a...
Right. Everybody gets a line designation. Now, with the infantry regiments, they didn't bother with any other designation because they didn't need to, right? But when you start talking about different functions, different battle functions like artillery, cavalry, heavy artillery, stuff like that, they start getting additional designations that, nobody's running around telling or, calling the 1st PA Cavalry the 44th Pennsylvania. So why do we insist on doing this with any of the regiments in the reserves?
Is it just like record keeping on a state level? It's just something silly like administrative like that?
Right. And it doesn't really start turning up even at the federal level until like the 1880s and 90s, where they're trying to keep their records that they're pulling from the state straight, right? So instead of having to sift through all these records at the War Department for, a guy's disability claim or a widow's pension, something like that, they just pull all of the line designations for these units. So people start looking into, in the more modern era, like they start doing research. Inevitably, that leads you to the National Archives, and you start looking at, pension files.
Right.
And the pension files all say, like 42nd PA. They have a bunch of other designations on there too. So it's not just 42nd PA, but that's the big one because that's what the files are being, that's what they're being archived as. But it's not a designation that is used
in the field
during the war.
Right.
Right.
But that other unit that's out there that has that designation thinks it's this.
Well, you've got, the 1st Pennsylvania, which is a 90-day regiment. You've got the 1st Pennsylvania Rifles, which is the Bucktails, the 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, the 1st Pennsylvania Cavalry,
So let's do some clarifying real quick. So I know that in 1855 or roughly thereabouts is when the U.S. Army adopts the rifled weapon for the common line infantry. So everybody basically has a rifle in their hands on the line. So when you say a rifle regiment, what does that mean just as opposed to a standard infantry regiment?
We'll get to that in 2 seconds. Let me finish up with this. The Bucktails have several designations, right? There's the 42nd PA, which, as we talked about, is anachronistic. The 13th Pennsylvania Reserves, which is an official designation, but they don't use it during the war. I think I've seen it once or twice.
Okay.
That's it. They are generally known as the 1st Pennsylvania Rifles or simply the Bucktails. But during the organization of the reserves, when they start building these regiments up, the Bucktails end up petitioning to have the regiment named the Canes Rifle Regiment of the Pennsylvania Reserves. Right.
That's an easy.
So it's another official designation, but it's not. Again, it's not one that really gets used. So if you want to be proper, if you want to know. If you want to sound like you know what you're talking about, it's the Pennsylvania Rifles, 1st Pennsylvania Rifles, or the Bucktails, right? And very often simply the Rifles.
I wish we were cutting a wrestling promo so I'd know who exactly we're talking to. We're talking to reenactors, I feel like, or like layman researchers, like talking to you, brother.
It is something that I have seen, unfortunately, in some larger publications of late.
I'm talking to you, author.
Yeah. So, but I'm not gonna throw names out.
Oh, we don't do the direct dogging on the show. We do the implied dogging.
Yeah, we're not doing that, which is unfortunate because I really enjoy their works. But like, there's some things that just really they chap my ass, for lack of a better term.
So the things in that regard, is it just because those particular instances? It's like, come on, man, like that's easy to find, or should know better.
Something like that is pretty easy. The problem is, I don't think people are doing a ton of like original research anymore. I think that a lot of this stuff is just being carried over from previous researchers, and I understand why.
Yeah.
But in some cases, it's just lazy to me.
I feel like a lot of people think it's a trend, and as such are doing what you're describing as this carryover research. Like, I've read this before in so-and-so's book in a
right.
Basically change my homework. Don't, it's like, yeah, of course you can copy it. Just change it a little bit.
You see that a lot with Gettysburg stuff. For all the for all the things that get published, like even written works, right? Not just YouTube videos. Right. For all the stuff that gets published, a lot of it is still pulling from either Coddington's Gettysburg Campaign or Harry Fonz's books, right? And for as good as those volumes are, there are some things that are in there that are incorrect, or they're just based on, like, Coddington's book came out over 60 years ago, right? That is an old piece of work.
Right. The digital age is not a part of that. The expanse of research is not involved in that research.
Right. They did the absolute best that they possibly could for the 1950s. Right. But there's a lot more stuff out there now. So like some of the assertions are incorrect just based on, more current research, things that have come to light since then. But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds with that.
No, because I do want to ask you about some specific things we want to sort of set the record straight on, or like some specific beefs. But so let's talk about that rifle regiment designation thing that's confusing to me, because, again, in 1855, I believe, is when the U.S. Army finally realizes this technology that we've had for quite some time is worth putting into the hands of everybody in the basic line of infantry. So how does that work to designate a unit as a rifle regiment? In the past, I understood it when everybody had smoothbores, but now I don't understand it because everybody's got rifles.
So this is early on in the war, right? This is, May of 61, June of 61. The reserves are being organized. The state doesn't really have much on hand in the way of arms. Most of what they have are old converted 1816s. Right, so these are all 69 caliber smoothbore guns that used to be flintlock and now they're percussion. Right, so not everybody has rifles. That's the way they want it to be.
And that's also the U.S. Army, the regular Army.
Right, and that is the standard. But like you and I were talking about before we even started this recording, was like, you look at World War II and like late war with Japanese and German weapons, you see what they call late ditch stuff or last ditch stuff. And it's all very crude looking. Right. It's all a substitute standard. Right. So at this point in the war, we're still talking about substitute standard stuff because manufacturing has not caught up with demand. You're going from a standing army of like 30,000 ish.
Max.
I don't even think I think it's much lower than that, like 20.
I think it's less than 20, to be honest. I think it's somewhere around 16, and most of them are out west.
That sounds about right. You go from having to equip a standing army of, we'll say, 16,000 to now you've got a volunteer army of what, 100,000?
I mean, it starts at 75,000 plus, and then it grows, right?
Right, and it goes up pretty quickly. You can't. There's not like a magic switch that you can just turn on and say, "Hey, I need all of these guns right now." There's, since I'm in manufacturing now, like it takes a certain amount of time to be able to tool up production and actually start making things. So they're still reliant on stuff that had been in storage basically since the Mexican War, like all these old 1816s. That they went through and converted in, I think mostly in the early 1850s, that had just been sitting around, and they had a whole bunch of them, but they're not a great weapon. So they get the rifle designation because they are intended to be a rifle regiment, right? Like that's the way it's pitched to them during the recruiting phase, right? They're going to go out and they're going to be equipped with the best new rifles, and they're going to function as a rifle regiment.
That's what I was going to ask was, so when when they make the decision that they're going to be a rifle regiment in this sea of we're taking what we can get military wise, I was going to ask, was it no matter what weapons you end up with, they'll be rifled weapons? But you answered my question because you said they'll end up with the like what's out and what's hot and right now. Well,
they don't.
Maybe what's intended is that.
Right. They're intended to be a rifle regiment, and they are promptly so. The companies from the northern tier, the Wildcat District, which is where I live now, primarily companies CG and I from Cameron, Elk, and McKean counties, and Company D, which is from Warren County. They bring their rifles with them, their personal deer hunting weapons. Right.
Right.
They get told to send them home, right? Because they're all going to get issued this standard rifle. They don't know what it is yet. Excuse me. So they send all of these weapons home and are promptly issued with converted Model 1816 smoothbore guns.
And they're like, what the frick, dude?
Yeah, it causes a near riot. They are not happy about this at all. And basically what the state ends up having to do is saying, hey, like, we legitimately don't have anything else to give you right now. We need you to have standard weapons to make ammunition supply easier, because otherwise you've got guys with 36, 45, 52 caliber guns. Everybody has their own specific bullet and patch and powder, and it would be a logistical nightmare. But they say as soon as we get rifled weapons available, we will issue them to you. And they do make good on that. The rifles, the 5th Pennsylvania Reserves, and a battery of the artillery regiment end up getting sent out to like the Cumberland, Maryland area in June of 61. And they're there through July before they get recalled to Harrisburg to be federalized. And when they come back to Harrisburg, the state now has rifled weapons that had been in the hands of 90-day regiments that have just mustered out. So they issue them a mix of it's 61 Springfields and 53 Enfields, right? And they, they're rifled. They're okay with this. There's always the promise of a better weapon, and they do eventually get them. In September of 62, after the Army's gone back into D.C. after the Second Manassas campaign, I think it's September 5th or 6th, the Bucktails are issued Sharps rifles.
Oh.
There had been a number of them, and this is another like myth, right? There's this story that's floating around about the Bucktails at Harrison's Landing at the end of the 7 days stealing weapons from Berdan's, right? Like they just go Bogart, or they just go like gaffle all these double set trigger Sharps rifles from Berdan's.
I'm just gonna go take them from like crates or from like men who are sleeping.
No, just like crates of them. Right. And there's a grain of truth to this.
Okay. I mean, I was going to say, where does it come from?
So it was done officially. Right. So the Berdans had lost a number of men during the Peninsula campaign. They had recovered their weapons and they were basically in storage. And the Army, the Ordnance Department made the determination that they weren't going to just keep these weapons in storage. They were going to issue them out. And so here's the Bucktails, who are supposed to be a rifle regiment. There's only, 80 of them kicking around after the 7 days. And so they get issued all these Berdan Sharps rifles. And there's a letter from Berdan complaining about this in, I think, late July or early August of 62, saying, I want my rifles back.
Because he paid.
Like I'm getting guys back from the hospital.
These are the ones
guys who are being exchanged, like in the prisoner exchange. I need these weapons back.
Are these the ones he paid for himself?
No, these are ones that the government had bought.
Because remember, he does. It's the story is he buys the initial round, right, or whatever.
I'm not super familiar with how Berdan's worked. I know at least the first were originally issued Colt revolving rifles, which were like wildly unsuccessful because, as it turns out, like you have the same problem with a revolving rifle that you do with a revolver, where you can end up with chain fire. But with a rifle, you've got a hand out front of the chamber, so like you can shoot your own hand off.
You could shoot your eye out.
But,
All right,
but ultimately, they do get issued Sharps rifles.
Where does the theft come from? Like, is it just what is that?
I don't know where that originated from. I think it's just I hate to say it, but like a reenactorism that's been carried around, and it's not a super popular story, so it's not one that I typically go out of my way to correct because not very many people know it. But the Bucktails have, at least in the modern era, partially contemporary of being very rowdy and undisciplined, which isn't really true. And I think that the theft of the Berdan's rifles just kind of naturally evolved from putting those two things together.
Are they rowdy?
Yeah, to a point. When the original three companies were recruited and started making their way to Harrisburg, they were stopped at a place called not Sealands Grove, Sunbury, Pennsylvania, which is north of Harrisburg on the Susquehanna River. And they were there for the better part of a week. Basically, what had happened is the state said, we cannot take any more volunteers. You need to stop and go back. So they stopped. They didn't go back. And eventually they did secure permission to proceed to Harrisburg. But there are several newspaper articles talking about a small riot in Sunbury where it looks like possibly one of the Bucktails got drunk and got into a fight with a local constable. He was arrested duly, of course. They didn't seem to like that too much.
But he was arrested for doing crime?
Yeah, right. And so they basically get a whole bunch of dudes together, go down to the jail, and demand his release. There's like a small, not necessarily a riot, but it's getting pretty heated.
So
they do cut him loose.
Okay.
And I think it's either the next day or 2 days later they go to Harrisburg. But that's something that's in several newspapers in central Pennsylvania the following day.
I always wonder what happens logistically, like, or administratively behind the scenes when you have like a sheriff, constable, whatever, who's got this, they're under arrest, right? So I imagine some sort of paperwork has been filed, like I've arrested this guy. But then like the posse shows up and then they have to cut him loose and it's like, right. Charges dropped, cut loose, didn't want to die last night.
I don't know that they were keeping much paperwork at that time.
No, I know. But just like, my brain wonders, it's like, what are the official records of that? Like, yeah, let this guy go because there was 50 guys and one of me. Like,
right. What? There's some truth to that. I think it gets way overblown. Particularly by the time you get to late 61, it seems like for the most part, these guys take a lot of pride in their ability to drill and discipline and all that. So much so that like there's kind of a falling out with the original lieutenant colonel of the regiment, Thomas Kane. He was a guy from Philadelphia. His father was he was the federal judge for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania Thomas Kane had clerked for him for a few years, resigned over the fugitive slave laws in the 1840s. He had lived in France for several years, got involved with the Mormons early on, personally took a very large hand in ending the Utah War in the 1850s. So, like when the army was going out to Utah to wipe the Mormons off the face of the earth, because they kept killing immigrants going through their territory.
Dude, one day we're doing an episode on the Mormons and the West. Like,
that is such a massive story.
I know, and it's so violent, and it's so touchy because obviously the faith does not practice similarly today.
No, but they also until very recently didn't even really acknowledge
that they were
the atrocities that were committed. Right. So when you do that, you're going to have to find somebody who is super unbiased.
Yes. That's why we haven't done it yet, because we want to, at all times, we want to be as respectful as possible on this show. There's very few things where I'm I don't care about respect here. Mainly if you're of the opinion that the Civil War wasn't about slavery. That's sort of where that shows up.
You're an idiot.
It's so stupid at this point. But but it's a topic that's fascinating, and as somebody who's always been personally very interested in the old Wild West, for me as a kid, you grow up, it's cowboys, it's Indians, and then eventually trains become a part of it because they build the railroad through this whole story, and then eventually you cross the mountains, and then you get all these wagon things, and eventually then you kind of realize you've skipped over this whole interaction with the peoples in the Utah area and point south and heading into northern Mexico, and it's
there's this whole thing called Deseret.
Right, we had this whole other war that basically happened and didn't happen at the same time. So I do want to talk about it, but again, respectfully, because it is such an incredibly difficult and touchy subject. So we'll get there.
Absolutely.
All right, so back to what you know, right? So the Bucktails, right?
Right. So, anyways, we were talking about Kane. That's how we got on.
Kane. Yeah, they're falling out.
So anyways, Kane raises the original three companies, CG&I, up in my part of the state. Brings them to Harrisburg, gets the regiment organized, right? So they haven't held elections for officers yet, but he's the guy that organized, the original companies, the nucleus around which this regiment's going to be built. And they add, 7 additional companies. There's 2 from Tioga County, 1 from Warren County, 1 from Clearfield, one from Perry, 1 from Carbon, and then 1 from Chester County, and they all come together.
Near Philadelphia,
right? So this is another misconception that we're going to get to here in about 3 seconds. So they hold elections for officers, right? And Kane is initially elected colonel. A guy named Charles Biddle is elected lieutenant colonel. Now, Biddle had experience in the Mexican War. Kane had exactly 0 military experience whatsoever, other than the fact that he was aware that the Army existed. Now, he declined the post of colonel in favor of Charles Biddle, right? He basically said, I'm really pleased that you think so highly of me, but I don't have any experience. This guy does. Elect him colonel, just elect me lieutenant colonel so I can get some experience. So they do. And that was probably not the best move on his part, because by the time they held, so Charles Biddle ended up resigning his commission in late 61 because he was a representative elect. Right, so he had to go take his seat in Congress.
Oh, I was going to say, in Washington. Right.
Right. So Charles Biddle resigns his commission. They have to hold elections again, and this is after the Battle of Drainesville.
So we're talking like end of December 61.
Right. Late December 61. And Kane had become unpopular in the regiment at that time because he was an affable guy. It seems like personality-wise, most people got along with him. He could be a bit annoying, but he just could not learn the drill. And so these guys take a lot of pride in their ability to drill with precision, and he just cannot learn the commands correctly. So he's going out on the drill field with full regiment for battalion drill, and he's struggling with remembering, like, how do I make them go through this particular evolution? And he's just kind of making commands up on the fly. And they don't care for that at all. And so when elections are held, Kane is skipped over in favor of the captain of Company D, Hugh McNeil. Right. So this dude skipped over Major Stone and Lieutenant Colonel Kane to take the colonelcy. And Kane was not. Kane was very displeased by that.
Yeah, he says, "I have the controls now."
Yeah, and this kind of leads to another myth that I just heard very recently, that Kane had challenged Hugh McNeil to a duel over this, which isn't true. However, I have come into possession, well, not possession, but I've got copies of Hugh McNeil's personal correspondence from during the war. There's a whole bunch of letters. And you can see the progression of Hugh McNeil's opinion personally of Kane dropping progressively. And there's this cliff at Drainesville, right? He is disgusted by Kane's behavior at Drainesville. And so he gets elected. Hugh McNeil gets elected to the colonelcy. And Hugh McNeil talks about Charles Campbell spreading this not directly challenging him, but he's getting word through the grapevine that Charles Campbell wants to challenge him to a duel. Charles Campbell had been in command of the artillery regiment. And this is the period where the artillery regiment is being broken up and the individual batteries are being assigned all over the army. So Campbell no longer has a regiment, and he's got to find one to command real quick before he loses his job. And he feels personally that he should have been in line for the rifles. And according to McNeil, Kane is fomenting this problem with Campbell on the side because, of course, Kane is upset about McNeil being put into command. And I can't prove it, but it makes a lot of sense to me that in the spring of 62, when these guys are waiting at Falmouth to be forwarded to the peninsula, there are 4 companies that get split off from the regiment and sent out to the valley with Kane. Kane's in command. And the 4 companies happen to be the 4 companies that had voted for Kane in the election. So I think, and I can't prove that this is the case, but it would make a lot of sense to me that those 4 companies and Kane were sent to the valley for a cooling off period.
I mean, because they thought the valley was going to be quiet.
Right. And, they send these 4 companies off with two cavalry regiments and a horse artillery battery. Why in the hell would you do that to infantry? Those poor bastards running all over the valley, trying to keep up with the people that they're assigned to. But they do good work out in the valley.
Let's talk about Drainesville for just a brief second. When we talk about Kane and sort of being critical of his behaviors and things at the battle, to sort of sum up without doing a full battle study, just sort of what is the experience of the Bucktails? What is the sort of the beef with the way Kane conducts himself on the field?
So, according to McNeil, Kane kind of just ditched the regiment and went off with the 6th Reserves. For some reason, he takes like temporary command of the 6th, and McNeil commands the Rifles. I don't know what specifically. I'm not super well versed on Drainesville to say exactly what happened, but there's also this rumor floating around the regiment. It's in several letters that I've seen from other people that Kane was drunk, which would be very much out of character because he was a teetotaler. And this goes back to, I think, one, Kane's wounded at Drainesville. Lightly, but he's wounded. He's also a very excitable person. And I think that the combination of those two things kind of made it seem to passersby that, like, oh my God, this dude's drunk. Not
like he's out of sorts.
Right.
He's not drunk.
No, I don't. That would be very out of character for Thomas Kane.
Do you know that assuming command of units that you shouldn't really be with is not unique to this moment as far as Pennsylvania reserves and people associated with them, or Pennsylvanians in general? Do you know this?
What are you going to tell me now?
John Reynolds gets put up on a pedestal a lot.
Oh, yeah, the guns at Fredericksburg.
100%. Like, yeah. Where are you? Like, literally, another Pennsylvanian's getting hung out in the wind. He's looking for you, and you're just fucking off down there with the artillery.
Yeah, Corps commander directing the fire of individual guns.
Like, what are you doing? Like, go back up the guy. Exploit the breach. Anyway, I blame Fredericksburg on John Reynolds. That's what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
But that's as soon as you started talking about he was kind of like off with this other command. I was like, wow, I know immediately of another Pennsylvania. What are you guys doing up there, Eric? Go to work.
Well, we're just trying to make things happen. The problem is we get stuck in the weeds. A lot of micromanaging. Right.
I feel like, because of my unfamiliarity, is this their first major combat action?
Yeah, it is. The Rifles in the 5th had been out in Western Maryland, and they had skirmished a little bit, but nothing. No stand-up fights.
The reason I'm asking is because it's interesting that the critique or the opinion cliff kind of happens right there. It's like, this is the first time a lot of these guys are seeing the real bad stuff. And right. So are we judging? I mean, is McNeil being fair? I always want to ask that question. He could very well be. He likely very well is, right? But like,
it's hard to. It's really kind of hard to assess Kane's abilities in command, right? Because he's at Drainesville, but Drainesville's not that big of a deal, right? It is at the time, but in the grand scheme of the war, Drainesville's not that big of a deal.
Right.
He's in the valley, but he's in the valley with 4 companies. And while they do good work, there's really only one, like, stand-up, knock-down, drag-out fight that they have, and that's at Harrisonburg. And Kane is grievously wounded at Harrisonburg. And so he's recovering from his wounds all the way up through January of 62. And then and by that point he had been made a brigadier general. He technically had a brigade to command, but he wasn't physically present because he's still recuperating from being, shot the fuck up at Harrisonburg.
Right.
By the time he does actually take the field again, it's the Gettysburg campaign. He takes command of his brigade at Gettysburg because, again, like, he has pneumonia through most of the first half of 1863, catches up with the army on the field at Gettysburg, takes command of his brigade on Culp's Hill, and almost immediately has to turn it back over to George Cobham, who had been commanding it temporarily permanently, in Kane's absence, because he physically can't take the field. He's very sickly for the rest of his life after Harrisonburg. He actually resigns his command on July 4th at Gettysburg, resigns command of his brigade.
Wow.
Because he knows good and well he can't do this. He takes command of some recruiting functions out in western PA around Pittsburgh, but ultimately resigns his commission at the end of 1863. He just can't do it physically. He ends up back in northern PA. He founds a town called Kane in McKean County. It's not named for him. It's named for, I believe, his father.
Michael Kane.
No, not Kane. Not
the town was founded on a Tuesday.
Right. Anyways, he's in land and lumber speculation, gets involved with the railroads. He's president of the railroad that builds Kinzu Bridge in the 1880s, which at the time was the largest railroad bridge on the planet, and was for some time after that. It no longer stands. It got taken out by a tornado. But anyways, he goes on to do good things, but he's not really involved militarily. Is that a good thing? Maybe. Is it a bad thing? I don't know. But I can't really make an honest assessment of his capacity to command troops in the field because there isn't a lot of examples to go off of.
It's just like the reason I was asking is because it's like, man, it's like the first time.
Right. But you see that with a lot of the early war regiments.
Sure.
Where, we've elected this prominent local businessman to be colonel because he seems like he's got his shit together, and you go to war and oh my God, he wets his pants and can't function as a human being.
Because before that moment, right, the war is just speeches and emotions.
Right.
Man, checks the box.
It's all theoretical stuff until you start getting shot at, and now it's f***ing real, and you haven't identified until that point who your actual combat leaders are.
It's a sobriety that I'm sure you know personally from your own military experience. Like, I'm sure that's a sobriety moment that probably every combat veteran goes through. I'm sure every single one across the board goes through this. Okay, this person was great when we weren't getting shot at Bragg or at Benning or wherever, and now we're here, and oh my God, like it's not the guy. Like they're not the guy or whatever.
Right, and you never know how people are going to react to getting shot at until they get shot at.
Until they're in the moment.
There's no way to weed that out.
Right. So,
anyways.
So McNeil, though, regardless of right or wrong, he falls off the cliff. I guess this is where I'm sure people start to talk more openly about this. That's probably where the ability to gain a vote that jumps over him comes from, right? Like this sort of rumor mill or gossip mill or whatever starts to make its way around. Is McNeil a driver of that, or is he the sort of that like legitimate
not that I'm aware of that? No, that seemed to have been something that just kind of took over organically within the regiment.
So, I mean, which breathes air into the legitimacy of it. It's like if it's happening organically, there's probably something to it. That not that many people are going to misread the situation. Potentially. I'm speculating. I'm curious because it feels like such a human thing to happen.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
It's like, man, it really, for better or for worse, it changes, the trajectory or the experience of Bucktails. It's a very important moment, and it's human, and I just want to explore it. So shouldn't speculate on the air.
Kane does a lot of great things for the regiment early on. One, it's his baby. Like This is his idea. And he's the one who petitions Governor Curtin to raise a regiment like this from the Northern Tier. Kane's also the one that gives them the bucktail, right? So what happens is in Smethport, PA, in April of 61, Kane has set up his personal headquarters at the Hotel Smethport across the street from the county courthouse. So he's recruiting out of that location. He has two other companies being recruited at the same time by other people, one in Elk County and one in Cameron County. And one of his early recruits from Company I, which is the McKean County company, is a guy named James Landrigan. And James Landrigan, there's a butcher shop, like kind of catty corner to the hotel. Landrigan enlists. He sees this deer hanging up over at the butcher shop. He goes across the street. He cuts the tail off and pins it to his hat. And Kane sees it and decides that this is going to be the badge of the regiment. We're going to be the Bucktails. Everybody needs to have a bucktail.
My brave boys, as we go into battle, we will affix deer buttholes to our hats, and they will know us by our deer.
Now, the myth of this is, and I cannot track down exactly where this started, but the myth part is to join the regiment, you had to go out and kill a buck, and you would bring back its tail as proof that you had done this.
Such an inefficient means of staffing regiment.
It's ridiculous.
Not how militaries work.
Not only that, but like there's absolutely nothing about the tail that would prove that this was a buck or a doe. Also, why would you make that like the criteria for joining the regiment? Like if you were going to have any sort of marksmanship qualification, like why wouldn't you just set up a target that you can like objectively judge?
That is like some old school 18th century, ranges from like militias and ranger units to like native logic. Is like you must accomplish X.
Right.
Or like what's the World War II thing I'm thinking of? The German paratroopers or whatever, they had to climb.
Oh, the Edelweiss badge?
Yeah, they had to climb the mountain to get that or whatever, but it's like
well, that we can talk about that separately. That is
kettle of fish.
Like the Edelweiss badge is a thing, not like the little plant stuck in it. World War II is not my deal. So we've got that myth floating around, and it's a pretty widespread myth. It is super common for me to hear that. There is no truth to it. I don't know where it started from, and there's nothing in any of the writings of any member of the regiment that I've ever read that would lead you to believe that there's any, like, even a grain of truth to that. Sorry.
I bet you that rumor is no older than the 1960s.
I don't know.
That feels like one of those things that just comes right out of that era of like, we made it up.
I don't know. It's like I can't find like much of a written record of it prior to the 90s.
Which is the other major boom in reenacting.
Right, but I know that this existed prior to that.
The reason I think the centenary kind of era pops out of my mind is a likely genesis for this is because you can look everywhere from just like physical art, like, you know, pictures, paintings, things like that, to music, that people just make stuff up in this moment of really overblown observation and celebration, depending on what part of the country you're in.
Right.
And like, I'm a big fan of Southern rock, right? Despite how people think I am because of the things I say out loud on the show from time to time, sometimes directly or indirectly. Like, I love Southern rock. And so like the band is one of the bands that I grew up listening to. And they have, you know, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down was one of the most popular songs of this sort of 60s, 70s era. And in that song, it's just full of bullshit. Like Robert E. Lee was in places he wasn't, and like all this stuff, and it's like, it just kind of, it's this whole moment of like, we're making it up so we can feel nostalgic, and we'll talk about the power of nostalgia another day, but it's just one of those things that made me wonder, is like, it just feels like that grew out of that era.
And it may have. Again, I can't track down where it started. I just know that it's been floating around for a long time, at least by word of mouth. And yeah, it is nonsense. If you look at, right, so I gave you the origin story according to the regimental history, right? I have looked at James Landrigan's personal copy of the regimental history. He did leave some notes in it. He said nothing about that. So I'm going to say that James Landrigan probably approved of what was published. Kane himself, and I've seen this published in an older history of the county that unfortunately didn't cite its sources. You're right. There's no footnotes. There's no citation. None of that, which is fairly common for like the 60s and 70s. But anyways, Kane himself says that, after Landrigan got the initial tale, they didn't have any problem sourcing tales at the hunting shacks in the area, right? Mm-hmm. So they basically just went out to all these different hunting stands.
I need 20 deer buttholes now.
Well, at the time there was a lot of industrial hunting going on in the area, and so that was like their primary source of tales initially.
Sure.
And later on, there's a guy from Company I who does business selling tales, replacement tales to guys in the regiment. And he's getting cases of like 100 to 200 tales at a time expressed to him. And he's selling them for like $1 a piece to guys in the regiment. So like that's kind of how they retain tales for most of their enlistment. They're getting replacements sent to them, or they're buying them from the student Company I.
I feel like you guys, I say you guys just because I feel like you're just like part of the unit as long as I've known you, the association with, but I feel like a mark was missed by going after the bucktail. It's like, why not grab the antler and either do the pagan thing and affix them and look terrifying. Confederates would be freaked out, or it's the thing you just like tuck under the belt and it's like that melee weapon for close combat. It's like, could you imagine that reputation? A whole bunch of Pennsylvanians were just ripping dudes apart with deer antlers.
I feel like that would just be wildly impractical.
But it would be hella awesome.
Fair enough.
It'd be better than a deer. So is the actual butthole involved? I've made that joke 100 times because I know that it sounds like one of the reenactor jokes, but like
it's not.
It's very closely involved.
There is a physical separation between the two on the hide, but like when you're cutting the tail off, you don't get any.
You don't bring the starfish with you.
No, not at all. And even if you manage to somehow, when you skinned it out to dry it, like all that would go with it anyways.
I feel like that's a tease that I have in my mind just for you, because I feel like at one point in time you hated when I would bring that up, but we've mellowed so much over the last couple of years because of all the real life stuff happening. But I feel like at one point in time that was how could I make Eric want to punch me right now? And I feel like that was one of the old ones. I have like a vault of things I could pull out that would just get you going, but I'm pretty sure that was you. All right, so we've busted a few myths so far. I can't imagine there's a lot, but then I think every time I think I understand how far the depths or how deep the depths of especially Civil War anachronisms or mythology go, I find that they just go abyssally lower than I think. So
yeah, and like I said earlier, like there's some stuff that's like really widespread, and that's some stuff that's really pedantic.
All right, give me some pedantic stuff, quick fire, and then give me some like Dude, just I can't even believe we're still talking about this type of stuff. Just quick fire.
Well, here's one. Hugh McNeil killed 2 guys with 1 bullet at South Mountain.
Hell yeah, but not true.
No, there's no way that that's true. I can't prove it without a shadow of a doubt that it's not. But
what's the story?
If so, as they're advancing up South Mountain, they get to a point where there's a stone wall. There's rebels behind the stone wall. There's these 2 specific rebels that happen to be looking out through the same gap in this rock. And they say very specifically that they're side by side, right? And Hugh McNeil takes a sharps, takes aim, fires, and kills both of them with the same bullet. But to my mind, that's basically a magic bullet theory, because it would have to go into one, make like a hard 90-degree turn,
right,
and go into the other one. Now that one,
it's not impossible.
Right. It's not a well-known myth. It's not impossible, but is it plausible? No. Is it likely? Absolutely not. That originated in an article in, I think, the New York Tribune. Maybe it was one of the New York papers in late '62. So like December of '62 is when this article ran, and it was from a letter. It was from a letter from an anonymous officer in the regiment.
So Hugh wrote it himself.
So grandiose.
Hugh McNeil did this.
McNeil was dead by the time. McNeil was killed on September 16th at Antietam.
Oh, in the skirmish stuff the night before?
Going into the East Woods, McNeil is killed, leading the regiment.
I feel like I remember that actually from the reserves episode. I feel like we talked about that for a bit.
Yep.
So maybe he wrote it beforehand and was like, in the event of my death, publish this letter. Or, and he's not a Southerner. Or, I mean, just a cool way to memorialize your dead commander that you liked.
The general tenor of the article makes me believe that this is just something that was written in-house, and they ascribed it to an unnamed officer to try to give it some credibility.
Oh, like the Tribune just generated that.
Right. And that seems to be something that happened semi-regularly in newspapers throughout the week.
No, newspapers would never make shit up, ever. Not now, not then, certainly not. No.
So it seems to me like it's nonsense.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's one. There is, and this one's not actually a myth. This one is actually true. So at Harrisonburg, one of the regiments that was fighting the 4 companies of Bucktails at Harrisonburg was the 1st Maryland, which became the 2nd Maryland. Later, I think late '62, beginning of '63, they became the 2nd Maryland. Now, the Rifles had done very good work against the rebels, and so much so that the 1st Maryland was given permission by Ewell to carry a bucktail on their flagstaff.
Ooh.
So they took a bucktail from a dead bucktail, put it on their flagstaff, and it is possible that that same flag was being used by the 2nd Maryland at Gettysburg on Culp's Hill, facing Kane's brigade.
Wow, the irony of that.
So yeah, right. So Thomas Kane is facing the 2nd Maryland at Gettysburg, the 2nd Maryland that he was fighting when he got shot up at Harrisonburg on Culp's Hill. That's wild. And it's possible that there was a bucktail on the flagstaff at that point.
something that you think they would have seen and been like, so we're getting that flag.
Well, maybe the Bucktails weren't there, but Kane was.
That's what I mean. Like Kane be like, boys, this might mean nothing to you, but we're getting that flag.
I don't know.
Everybody kill that color bearer.
The other big myth is, this is a regiment of sharpshooters, and it's not, and it wasn't ever really pitched that way.
Is that because of people's like non-understanding of the clarification between rifle regiment and all? Like, is that?
I think so. I think that's part of it. The original, so there's at least one original broadside that exists from Kane when he was recruiting in McKean County. And he very specifically states that he wants marksmen and people that are accustomed to using a rifle. And so I think it partially came from that. It was mixed up with the rifle regiment designation and a couple of apocryphal stories about like feats of marksmanship within the regiment that I can't prove. I can't disprove either, but a lack of evidence disproving it doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Yeah, that's the evidence of absence and the absence of evidence thing. But my brain, though, in situations like you got to kill the deer to join the regiment, like that stuff in my brain just shuts down quickly because of just my understanding of how military units are formed. Right. Like that doesn't jive at all with any sort of efficiency. And like, let's be real, especially when you're in these formations, especially the Civil War era of the exploding of the sizes of these armies. It's like, we're not doing every inefficient thing in the world. In fact, we need to be expediting and efficient as possible in swelling and growing all this. So I can't wait for you to go out and pick yourself a deer. And like, I have no time.
We don't have time
for that.
No, there's no time to do such things.
Right.
But I mean, there's not really any evidence that they were ever employed as anything more specialized than skirmishers. They do get used as brigade skirmishers heavily. But it's not like that's not an exclusive job for them. It's kind of a duty that rotates, but they seem to bear most of the responsibility for being brigade skirmishers in a fight. I can't say exactly where the sharpshooter myth came from, but it seems to me that it just kind of evolved out of a whole bunch of misunderstandings, and it culminated in that. And it doesn't help that it's spread by like reenactors. Reenactors are terrible about that. Not knowing like the genuine history of the units that they are in theory portraying.
Dude, reenacting. All right. So like reenacting is definitely something that if you combine all the times we've talked about on this show is probably just a reel of us clubbing it. And that is both like fair and unfair. Like I've always wrestled with the concept of like, I want to do an episode about reenacting. And I feel like I always step off the gas pedal for that because I always get stuck in the mud of my own. Like I personally don't even like the term reenactor because I want to be bougie and I'm a living historian. But
you want to try to separate yourself from the general perception of reenactors, and I don't blame you.
Right.
There's basically two primary hobbies there. There's mainstream reenacting, which is what the bulk of people know reenacting as being, and it's cowboys and Indians hoot and shoot at the local campground on whatever weekend, and it's the battle of Johnsonburg, right, which isn't real, but it's just a bunch of like fat old dudes in really shitty uniforms, just burning powder at each other.
But the reason that like I don't want to do this episode is because like I will club that to death, and rightly so, because then in a lot of ways that deserves to be clubbed to death. But then I'm like,
it does.
But then I'm like, but that's the light switch that turns on for so many people. They see those things, and then they find their way. Like, I remember when I was a kid looking back on it, the thing that, like, the reenacting thing that kind of turned my brain on was one of these stupid hoot and shoots in Binghamton, New York. But
yeah,
I want to separate myself from it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. It's kind of that, like, it's kind of that gateway drug where, like, you find out that these things exist, period, right? Where previously you had no idea that this was even a possibility as a hobby. And so you get into it through the mainstream side because that's what's most accessible to you as a regular person.
Right.
And we're not necessarily talking about now, but like when you and I started doing this stuff like 20 years ago, this is just the natural progression of things, right? You find a really crappy local reenactment. Oh my God, this is a real thing. I can do this. You get involved with a mainstream unit. And after you get involved in the mainstream side, you start to find out that there are more authentic ways to go about it.
Dude.
And so some people who are like really authentically minded migrate that way. And then there are some people who, for them, it is legitimately just a history themed hobby. And they stick with the mainstream side of things because it's easier. And they aren't necessarily looking to get like a genuine, authentic experience out of it.
I just realized as you were explaining that, Eric, that we had DARE for the wrong reasons in school. Did you have DARE when you were in elementary?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I don't know about you. I've lost some friends to drugs. Don't get me wrong, but I've lost more friends to reenacting than I've lost to drugs. You just described, it's like the gateway, right? You called it a gateway, and then it's like you get in and you're like, and then you find there's more hardcore stuff.
Right.
You want to go on this 17-mile march and not wear your shoes. You want to get this wool that will never soften no matter how much sun and sweat you put into it, because it's, and it's like, dude, we should have had police officers in our elementary schools warning us about kersey wool and what it does to people. Jesus.
I still would have been into it.
Me too, for sure. I mean, let's look at DARE, right? I was in rock and roll band for a long time, right? So I was still into it. So I got a Bucktails thing for you that has long confused me, and I know we've talked about it behind the scenes quite a bit, but I think it would be a good moment to get into it here on the show. Talk to me about Abraham Lincoln's personal bodyguard unit that also rides around with Bucktails. This is one that sort of confused me when I came across it years ago. I went down to what's today known as Lincoln's Cottage in Washington, D.C., the private residence that President Lincoln spent a lot of his early presidency in. And there they talk about, I believe, is it the 10th Pennsylvania? I don't know. Another unit that called themselves Bucktails, wore Bucktails, and they were essentially either the personal bodyguard or his escort unit as he would ride around either in Washington or other places. Tell me about this unit and why they're often confused with the Bucktails and they're not the Bucktails.
They are Bucktails, but they're not the Bucktails.
Right.
This is Company K of the 150th Pennsylvania.
150, not the 10th. I don't know where I got that from.
Right. So by mid-1862, the Bucktails had a pretty widespread reputation for being very good at what they did. And so this idea was floated in Pennsylvania to recruit a full brigade of Bucktails, right? So they figure if one regiment is good, 4 would have to be just phenomenal. And so they start the recruiting process. Roy Stone, who was the major of the Rifles, a guy named Langhorne Wister, who was in command of Company B, and a couple other junior officers get pulled back to Pennsylvania, and they recruit. They start recruiting this Bucktail Brigade. And they get 2 regiments recruited, the 149th and 150th. Recruiting is difficult. in summer of '62, and then all of a sudden the Maryland campaign happens, and so they say, we don't give a shit if you get a whole brigade or not. You've got 2 regiments. Get them to DC right now.
Right. Get moving.
So that ends the active recruitment campaign for that brigade, and they get lumped in with the 143rd PA. So it's the 143rd, 149th, and 150th PA. The 143rd are not Bucktails. The 149th and the 150th are, and they call themselves Bucktails, which causes a lot of angst within the original regiment, the Rifles. They are not happy about that. They think that these guys should be carrying a qualifier with that, right? So they should be either the new Bucktails or the 2nd and 3rd Bucktails, but not just Bucktails, because that's their reputation. They earned that. And so the 149th and 150th and 143rd are in DC. They get rushed there because of the Maryland campaign, which they aren't a part of at all. They aren't a part of the Fredericksburg campaign either. They are assigned to various guard duties all over the city. They're guarding hospitals, they're guarding storehouses, all this stuff. And they actually get broken up into these like platoon or even squad-sized elements and just kind of posted all over the place. So they don't even really get to do a ton of like battalion drill. And they don't actually get assigned to the Army of the Potomac until the spring of '63. And so they're part of the First Corps. They're technically at Chancellorsville, but like the rest of the First Corps, they missed all the fighting. They get shelled a little bit at Chancellorsville, but that's it. Like that's their exposure. And so they go to Gettysburg. Gettysburg is their first battle, and they, like the brigade as a whole, suffer something like 60% casualties. The 149th, which is actually the regiment that I'm descended from, the 149th loses 74.7% of the regiment in that engagement. The 150 loses 66, and the 143rd somewhere around like 50%. So it's a horrific opening battle for them. But while they're in DC, one of the companies of the 150th, and I can't remember which one it is offhand, is assigned to the soldiers' home, right, the summer cottage, to guard Lincoln while he's there, and he forms a relationship with the 150th through that. Now, when the brigade is assigned to the Army of the Potomac, it's not that company that stays at the summer cottage. Company K is cut out and sent to the summer cottage, and they're there for the rest of the war.
Okay. So as the unit as a whole eventually goes to actual war,
right?
Its fondness, however the grease worked, it greased the wheel enough to get
right.
Company K. Company K comes back, right? Yes.
Company K stays in DC.
That's what I mean.
They never actually go into the field. Like they're never on an active campaign. They are in DC for the entirety of their enlistment.
That's probably why I get confused about the bucktail, not bucktail, is because they're bucktails by the system they come up in, by traditional whatever. They didn't have to go kill deer or anything, right? But so when you were saying that we'll raise a battalion of bucktails, I had 2 jokes in my mind. One that I can remember easily was the and the deer in western and central PA started shitting themselves. It's like something so stupid. It's like, we got to raise a battalion of them. There's a lot of deer going to be running and hiding. And I forget what the other one was. It was one of those stupid jokes, but but it was interesting because in my mind, I guess, I've, like a lot of people with the Civil War, focused on more popular units or more personal to me units, more popularly and more personal to me, would be the Irish Brigade. Right. I've always found an interest in the Iron Brigade, obviously the Stonewall Brigade, things like that. Some of the units down in the Western theaters. So when I've been aware of the Bucktails, for some reason in my mind, it's kind of, it has always had some of this unique rifle regiment type of designation, maybe in the way I'm considering the Years of Old, but I've always put them in this, like, maybe I didn't personally believe you had to shoot a deer, but it was like there was something special and something related to the battlefield that, was part of the Bucktail thing. So when I knew the unit riding with Washington was wearing them, I was confused because I was like, wait, I thought this was like a baptism by fire thing. And it was just one of those things that always confused me because, like we just talked about, they're from the system, but they're not battlefield tested. It has nothing to do with that at all, but they get lost in the conversation.
Right. And it angers the rifle regiment, even through the veterans era. They are not, like, after the war, the rifles want absolutely nothing to do with the veterans of the 149th and 150th. And they're holding annual reunions at least as late as, I think 1916 is the last one that I know of for sure happened. But, for 30 years, from the early 1880s all the way through basically the beginning of World War I, these guys are holding annual reunions, and they never invite a single member of either the 149th or the 150th to participate.
Is that kind of like the relationship between D-Day vets and the replacement depot vets? Is that what they're viewing that as? Is like we were day oneers basically, and you guys are not?
I don't think it's quite the same.
I mean, because the units basically decimating casualties, right? It's not like they're not tested in the fires of war.
Absolutely, but they haven't. Like, they start calling themselves Bucktails well before that, and that's where the angst comes from, right? Is the Bucktails, they don't really earn the Bucktail; they just kind of take it, but they feel like they've earned this reputation, and rightly so.
Well, it's theirs at that point.
During the 7 days, right, you've got a 6-company battalion that gets whittled down to 62 guys in the course of a week. That's it. That's all that shows up at Harrison's Landing is 62 dudes. It's a 62 specifically is an absolutely decimating year for the reserves as a whole, but the Bucktails specifically. They take ridiculous casualties through the entire year. And so these guys show up and they've all got Bucktails pinned to their hats, and even knowing that the regiments were raised by Bucktail officers from the Rifles, and they're commanded by these guys, they are not happy about it. So much so that the 149th PA has a custom flag made for the Rifles and presents it to them in March of '63. The Rifles had lost their colors on the peninsula when the color company was cut off and captured. And they hadn't been issued new colors. So they'd been using an early war flag from Company I and one from Company K that weren't official. So the 149th has this flag made up and presents it to them to try to make the situation
us, guys. Yeah,
right. Please take this as a token of our respect and esteem. And that the hard feelings wear down a bit over the course of the war, but they never really go away. And like I said, in the post-war period, they genuinely have nothing to do with each other.
It feels,
and their histories are so far apart from each other that they get lumped together. I see this happen fairly frequently. but their actual like service histories are so divergent that like you can't confuse one with the other except through that Bucktail moniker.
So to switch gears to wind things down, Eric, why do you think it's so easy for a unit of such note to be so often incorrectly mythologized or anachronistically portrayed? Like why? And it happens with all of them, like all the brigades I listed a few minutes ago. I mean, there's some of the worst as far as offended by everything we're talking about. But why specifically with the Bucktails? Is it just something that just continuously happens? And when are you going to actually lay the smackdown on somebody by name and be like, just get it together, brother or sister?
I'm not gonna get confrontational like that. Like it doesn't do any good. And like I'm almost a non-entity in the history world anymore anyway. So, but I think this stuff continues simply because it's easy and it's a good story. Like it just sounds good on paper, but it's not true. And it kind of goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier with people doing lazy research, right? I get it. If you are writing a 2,000 page history on whatever, and it's got all of these different Hartwig's book, because I'm looking at both of them.
I was going to say which one, because they're both tomes.
Right. Absolutely. I understand not going to the National and the State Archives to pull company morning reports from a specific regiment when you're writing, like what are his books total, like 2,000, 2,500 pages, something like that, on one specific campaign that's got all of these different moving parts. I don't expect you to do research like that. That's not the point of your book.
Right.
Right. But, in general, I do expect some things to be correct, like regimental designations. That's important for people that don't have a serious depth of knowledge on the topic. If you're putting the wrong unit designation in and all of a sudden they get interested in finding out about this specific story, that makes it more difficult to go find those records later on, right? And it just gets confusing.
I think you're speaking to the shared responsibility, no matter whether you're the academic or you're the public historian, or whether you're the content creator who's looking to create content for deep study versus you're creating content more for entertainment. The one shared responsibility there is your obligation is to be as correct as is humanly possible.
Correct.
That's one thing that I often struggle with when I see my community is like, sometimes I think I see people that I both know from a distance and know very up close and personally. It's like and maybe at times even myself, with the show's gone on a long time. I'm sure at times some of these episodes have felt more entertaining and less substantive, and the pendulum swings, I got to remind myself. But I wonder if it's that shared responsibility that you're talking about, though. It's like everybody's job is to get it right. And I think that's why us as nerds struggle with like film. It's like, you might not know you have the intention or the assumed responsibility, but like the majority of people get their history from movies that are made about it or songs that are sung about it. It's not everybody's picking up I Dread the Thought of the Place or To Antietam Creek or any of Fonz's works, right? They're not picking up these tomes.
Sure.
They're seeing Mel Gibson hatchet a guy to death and going, that's how every militia soldier was. And it, in fact, just as a side rail, because I brought it up, I've been using that in my interpretation when we're doing the rundown of the soldier's gear.
Yeah.
And I'm basically referencing my hatchet as more of a tool. I say, now look, everybody knows what this is. Everybody has seen what Mel Gibson can do to a man with this, but believe it or not, that's not its intended use. I usually have people chuckling at that point. But I digress. So it kind of just comes back to this connective theme of like responsibility and nostalgia. And at some point, either this season or next season, an episode is going to come out. There's a big conversation we're having, just sort of about nostalgia. Ken Gavin and I have been sort of crafting something behind the scenes, so just kind of keep tuning in for that. But this is all wrapped up into that. So, Eric, I'm going to toss the final word to you. You're always welcome to come back and bust myths on the Bucktails or whoever else. You're always welcome to come back and tell a direct story. Like the Pennsylvania Reserves episode was an absolutely incredible one. I've been able to use that episode in actual research for myself. Like at work, I've used it as a reference multiple times just because we're talking units and things like that. So again, a compliment to you for that. But last words are to you, Eric Mohney. Let's take us home with the beef, with the Pennsylvania Bucktails there.
I've kind of covered everything I really wanted to. It's like you were talking about. As anyone who wants to be involved in the history field, right? Either as a public historian, an author, just some guy making videos on YouTube, right? You have an obligation to get things as factually correct as you can. And like I said earlier, if you're writing a 2,000-page book on one specific campaign, I don't expect you to do primary source research on specific regiments or companies, right? Unless that unit, is a key part of your narrative, then okay, yeah, I would expect some of that.
Sure.
But you need to at least get that surface level stuff that you're putting in correct. It needs to be.
Right.
If for no other reason than you do a disservice to the people that you're talking about. Even if it's for no other reason than that. Like, you have the obligation to tell their story as correctly as you can because they can't anymore. Everything that they can say, they've already said. And they're not going to speak again on the topic. They're gone. So it's on you to put that together factually.
So what we want to do then is basically say, look, with that responsibility, there's only really two things you can control. And I'm going to quote a good friend of mine, coworker of mine, a very wonderful coach, a guy who's been really influential in the lives of a lot of young men and young women as a coach along the years with high school and other recreational sports. We're going to quote the great and legendary past guest of this show, Rob Ambrose, when he says there's only two things you can control, and that is your attitude and your effort. So as we all assume this obligation and responsibility that Eric's talking about as writers, podcasters, tour guides, whatever's, all we can control is our attitudes and our efforts, and the efforts part is the big one you're talking about. Your obligation is to put the effort into understanding and getting those things right. So shout out to Rob Ambrose for laying down the good coaching wisdom there. I guess we're going to officially start calling him Coach Ambrose on the show now. I'm just going to just do that. But it's exciting, man. We're into season 7. I am very grateful, Eric, that you came out and got us going with a sweet conversation about something I know is near and dear to your heart. And I know that every January, everybody's always got a lot of these feelings because we've just had the post-holiday sort of shakeout of all things. So it's like, let's get into some myth busting. It always feels good to pop balloons after a while. And so it's good to start the year that way. We'll have you back. We'll probably meet up with you in the field at some point this year too. So, Eric, I know you don't do public history the same way that we do here on the show, but is there a place for people to follow along with any sort of work you're doing?
Not stuff that I'm doing personally. I've just recently agreed to rejoin the board of the Pennsylvania Reserves Volunteer Corps Historical Society. Jesus, that's a long name. It's the PRVCHS. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram under the Pennsylvania Reserve Volunteer Corps Historical Society. You can find our website. It's prvchs.org. We just launched a membership program. Part of that is the other thing that I'm doing. It's a biannual journal right? So we're going to be publishing in June and November of every year. That'll be part of the membership package, and it's basically a way to get some more scholarly work about the reserves out into circulation. And it's also a way for us to raise funds. We're a nonprofit, and we've got a lot of projects that we work on. We do a lot of like headstone cleaning, preservation, and replacement. We've replaced a number of headstones that were just, they're either broken and irretrievable, or like the old marble government headstones don't hold up very well over time. They sugar out and you can't read them. But we've replaced a number of those. We're going to continue doing that sort of thing. We've got a whole lot of stuff in the works. But I took on the position of directing editor of that journal.
How fancy, Eric!
Which is way outside of my wheelhouse.
Dude, you should have business cards made. If you don't, get them made now so you can remember that title.
So, but that's what we've got going on right now. That's where any work that I'm doing is at. I'm working on a book, but that's years down the road.
It'll see the light of day when it sees the light of day. But those are fine works you're doing in the interim, though, Eric. Always proud and interested in the works that you're doing there. That was an absolutely awesome conversation.
That was great. Yeah.
Eric Mohney is a fantastic person, great friend of mine, and a truly amazing storyteller. So it's pretty
100%.
honored to have him back on the show. Parker, what did you think of his beefs? What did you think of some things that maybe you learned? Because I can tell you I learned a few things through the course of that conversation.
So obviously I was never as close to the Bucktails as you were.
I mean, I'm not close to them.
Well, I mean, as far as like knowing,
I'm close
as much,
because of Eric.
Oh, that's true. That's probably true. Yeah, but I started off knowing only a few of the anachronistic things.
These are degrees of there's the Bucktails, and then there's Eric, and then there's me,
right,
and then there's you.
Can we just, every time the Bucktails say, can we just go hoo, just maybe
our listeners might tune out.
We like the Bucktails.
We do.
But no, like one of the things I loved, and I'd heard this, I'd heard the thing about, they had to go out and kill a buck and take its, tail.
Yeah, dude, so ridiculous.
And it's like, Eric pointed out something that I'm like, I'd always thought, and I'm like, how would you know by looking at the tail that was a buck? Was it the tiny little, it's the tiny little antlers that are on the tail?
They're British.
Well, they're also like, not just British, they're like Monty Python,
these
ridiculous
Pennsylvania
British.
woodsmen are now suddenly British.
Yeah. But no, like,
I mean,
how
it
would
is
you
a
know?
strange but fair question. Of all the questions you could have, I don't think where I would start, but it is valid extremely. How would you know?
How would you know? Like, just objectively, how would you know that this is a buck that you killed and not a doe?
Like, let me see that right now.
Yeah, like let's take me to the corpse.
Nope,
I mean,
just don't look right.
No, doesn't this look like a bucktail?
I don't know. You bastard. You son of a bitch. So I like that. Like, again, that's an easy one, but most people get stuck on that. The nostalgia, and again, nostalgia, big part of that. We talked about that, kind of teased it with the conversation with Eric. We'll be talking about nostalgia a little later this year, but there is that sort of nostalgia to that. It's like, you got to go get that romanticism. You got to go get that buck. It's so inefficient. No units are formed on an individual basis like that. Except for maybe elite rifle companies.
Right, exactly. I was also intrigued by the Lincoln, the kind of fallacy that they were like the same group or whatever, and they're not.
But they
the same.
are, but they aren't.
They are, but they're not.
Like, they literally are, but they never went into the combat situations that the rest of the unit did.
Right, and that was interesting. They're the same, but they're definitely not the same.
Right, and then again, they're kind of lost in that mud of the Pennsylvania, numerical designation swamp that I'm glad Eric touched on again, because it is just as confusing this time as it was when we did it in the reserves episode. But having all these cavalry and infantry and artillery units that have their own individual designations, but yet they just get stacked on the state level. in these numerical line designations. So your first Pennsylvania Light Artillery is like the 40 something.
Exactly.
Whatever. And it's like, dude, that is so ridiculously confusing.
Yeah.
But again, going to one of the other things Eric said, putting in a little bit of effort to find these things, to quote Coach Ambrose, you got to, you can only control your attitude and your effort. Well,
right.
The effort to do and get the research right, put some of it in, but this stuff isn't that hard to find. But again,
yeah,
he navigated the confusing swamp of all that.
And the other thing, I think that I just remember this. I think when I heard it, I was like, what? The bucktail on the flag at Culp's Hill.
Yeah. Or
how interesting is that?
Like if it did
if
go
that
down,
happened, which is a definite possibility that could have been there.
So many things just feel like a movie.
Right. Truth is stranger than fiction. That's one of the reasons why when I see some of these things that are allegedly like these based on a true story and they just fictionalize the crap out of it, I'm like, dude, the real story is just way better.
Yeah.
It's just way better than the fictionalized version.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. That
was great.
I hope that one's true because
I do too. It's one of those weird things. I guess it's that nostalgia getting me. If that's true, that's gonna get
again. That's why we're doing that special episode. I'm very excited to look for
that special project that I'm working on. I dealt with a lot of that nostalgia.
Yeah,
and it's
and the swing of it. Don't but the swing of it, both good and bad.
Yeah, I mean the thing about there's an old presidential candidate named John Edwards. You remember him? 2015, I think he was running for the Democratic nomination. He was against Hillary Clinton, and everybody was talking about how great the 90s were. And he said the problem with nostalgia is, now I realize John Edwards in jail now, but for like campaign, all this stuff. But his quote that is absolutely true is the trouble with nostalgia, you only remember the good parts.
Yeah, true in a lot of ways. Yes.
And what the special project that I will be bringing to all of you haven't even seen.
That's true.
The stuff yet.
That's true.
But the project that I'm working on, the nostalgia, is so rich, but it's also like, wow, it's so eye-opening, and I can't really divulge too much yet.
Well, that's fine. I look forward to it, man.
But the nostalgia was just dripping.
There are federal agents here, not the ones that we've been unfortunately watching on the news, but the men in black, the MIBs are here, and they are about to neuralize the absolute bejesus out of us for talking about
the
it.
other thing, and I don't know if the audience knows this about me or not, is I'm sorry, was that too quick?
No, I just got neuralized. Oh. You didn't see that?
No, I didn't see anything.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. What? Where am I? Anyway, the other thing about this show that really I really liked was the talk of weapons. Now, here's the thing. I stand amazed at some of the old weapons and some of these weapons from antiquity, the firearm, the evolution of the firearm as it's come up through modern day. I know jack squat about most of these weapons.
Sure.
I know a little bit.
Me too.
Like when I'm on the field, I try to know as much as I can about the one that I'm holding and the impression that I'm doing. But as far as some of these other ones, I hear these weapons and about how they're the revolving rifle. The revolving rifle.
Colt revolver.
The Colt revolver
we did,
rifle.
So I flubbed over the memory of us talking about this. It was you and me years ago talking about the 8th Virginia at Balls Bluff and how they had the Maynard tapes and they had the Colts. There's had this whole mismatch of like these weird weapons. And I forgot that Colt revolving rifle existed for a minute.
And me too. And we had talked about it. And you're right. We had this. I was like, I wonder what it would take to go get one. And we had looked. I don't even think at the time we were looking, I don't even think there was a repro in production, right? I think it was all
I never
just
looked into that. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it was literally just like, if you can find one in real, great, but you can't bring it out of the field because it would be a real authentic, weapon at that point. And I like the fact that those revolving, well, I don't like this fact. I think it's fascinating. Again, I'm fascinated by this stuff. It has the chain fire where you could bang and then all 6 would go off at once. You lose your hand.
Yeah.
I mean, that type of stuff fascinates me. I'm intimidated. Here's the thing. I'm intimidated by some of these weapons because I'm so fascinated by them, and there's so many different variations that exist during this time period. There is no way that my lizard brain is going to be able to retain all this information, and I'm sitting, of course, next to you, and you know way more. You've forgotten more about these weapons than I'll ever learn.
Yeah, and I'm not even an expert in it,
and right, but you kind of are though.
I mean,
is the thing.
I have a limited scope that I'm very functional in.
Let me explain what I mean. I think you could pick up any one of these weapons, look at them for 2 seconds, and go, okay, this is how it works.
Yes,
I would.
Okay,
I would be. You're saying. I would be like, okay, how does it? So like,
I thought you meant like how it was made, where it was made, when it was made.
Right.
Like I was like,
we were
functionally, yes, I could.
I
could figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was down in over my break. I was in Chickamauga, and I went to the Chickamauga again. We're always talking about it.
You're always talking about it. To be fair,
it's true. But they have this huge gun collection that's there, and it's you just walk in, and every time I go there, I love visiting it because, again, I'm fascinated by these things. But I'm watching them, and me and the boys are like staring at them, and like, how does that work? And I'm like, oh.
Sure.
I mean, I'm assuming the bullet comes out of that end.
Sure.
And I think that part goes up here, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, so like that's another good reason to have, great chats with Eric Mohney. Yeah. One of the things that didn't make it to the episode that's sitting on the cutting room floor was, as we started rolling in that production, Eric and I were talking about the Japanese Arisaka Type 99 from World War II. And so he and I both have variations of that rifle, and we were kind of going through, the ins and outs. So it doesn't even have to be limited to the 19th century weaponry that we were primarily talking about. Eric is a good resource for just firearms in general. Yeah. So we'll always be coming back to him as a reference and resource for that. I am excited to move into the rest of this year. I'm very deeply committed to where we kind of left off with the holiday episode, which we'll touch on that in a second, where it's just kind of like, I just want to go with the vibes and just feel good throughout the entire production of the show this year. And so, I'm excited just to know that there'll be another episode next month, and we're looking forward to having a great conversation with another one of our dear friends. The season is warming inevitably, which means we'll be hitting the field and we'll be grilling up meats again. So it'll be time to grill history with our friends. It'll be time to hit the field and track down some literal history to get our feet under the ground, get our hands on it if we can. Yep. So I'm excited that all those things are coming. I'm also honestly excited just for some snow. I'm hoping that weather-wise, in between all these podcasts, that we just get some snow.
It's been a while since we've been schnockered.
Since you've been schnockered?
Like, by snow.
Oh, by snow. I was like, I'm pretty sure, brother.
I mean, it's, you know what I mean? Like, the year before, it was the winter before I moved down here. Maryland got completely plowed. Both literally and figuratively.
That was a winter storm Jonas. Yeah,
was that what it was called? Jonas?
It was one of the rare winter storms that has a name. It was a weak name, but they gave it a name.
Okay.
I didn't pick. Don't look at me.
You Marylanders.
Maryland didn't pick the name. That was the National Weather Service.
Oh. Well,
that's the federal government.
You couldn't just draw a Sharpie on it and change it somehow.
The storm's gonna go this way
with a big circle around the middle of nowhere.
What a moron! Oh man, we have a lot on deck this year, guys. I'm very excited for it. The way we wound down the end of the year, in case you did miss it or did not tune into our holiday special, was we took a look back at the year as we usually do, but for the very first time, we put together a cut reel instead of us just kind of talking about it again. Yeah. It felt good just to kind of put together the clips and just listen. It did. Look, I missed hanging out with you and doing our holiday thing. Andy Williams was here in spirit. Oh, it was the most wonderful time of the year.
Wow.
We had our red tree up.
Oh, wow, our red tree.
Our weird red tree. Yeah, that tree was up.
I love that red tree.
I had my sweater on.
Oh. Well, see, that's the thing. The end of the year episode's always my favorite, and I know,
because it's just eggnog and good times.
Well, we just hang out. You know what I mean? It's like we don't have to
the fire.
Yeah. And it literally, okay. It looks like fun and games. There's a lot of hard work that goes into this.
There is. Christmas is mostly fun and games.
But the end of the year episode is not just.
It's just fun and games.
It's just fun. We get to kick back and. We're friends.
Again, Andy Williams was here.
We're friends
Best
off
of
camera.
Time.
And when we're working, we're not friending. So the end of the year episode is more friending and less
friending.
working.
We're less.
You know what I'm saying?
Do I? Yes, I do know what you're saying.
I mean, like, look at me right now. I mean, I'm coming from work. This is not friend.
You have a tie on?
I have a tie on.
I have boned Matt Borders for tucking in his T-shirt. Not like that, brother. I have gigged him so much for just the tucking into the T-shirt and other things. Man, you rolled in here into this studio wearing a tie.
Because I am a corporate shill now.
Wow. You work for the man, brother.
I'm working for the man every night and day. I never lost a minute of sleeping though, worrying about the way things might have been.
I'm raging against the machine.
Oh, you're raging against the machine?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Part of the resistance.
Yeah. The man pays better than the resistance, unfortunately.
This is very true. This is very true.
Yeah, I'm a total sellout now.
No, it's all right. You did have long hair, and then you pulled the Metallica. You didn't cut your hair. I did notice that.
Yeah,
that was the defining feature of cutting your hair.
I do need a haircut. It's like
very strange you are with your hair, buddy.
I know.
So going into next month, great conversation on deck. Going into the spring and summer, we're getting out in the field. We're grilling history. We're coming your way at 1,000 miles an hour. It is going to be an awesome season 7, a wild new frontier for us. Parker, are we boldly going?
We are boldly going where men have actually gone before because it's a history show.
Yeah, it's a historical podcast. We're not claiming to reinvent the wheel, guys. No. We're just having a good time doing what a lot of people have done, talking to our friends.
And, that's actually Star Trek accurate because, they could have gone back in time in one of many of their time plots. Maybe they went around the sun backwards at breakaway speed around warp 10. Maybe they just were thrown back into a time loop and ended up in the 1960s. Maybe they went back in time like a parallel universe where the Nazis actually won. That might be where we are now.
As usual, I have no idea what Parker Russell is talking about. That's Parker Russell. I'm Pat McGuire. This is the History Things podcast saying we will catch you all later!
Keep your stick on the ice.